Hey guys, it's Cynthia and welcome back to my studio. In one of my previous videos, Goldfish 1871 noticed that there was a backlit portrait on my shelf in one of the intros and asked if I could do a time lapse of another backlit portrait study. So that's exactly what we're going to do today, and here's the reference photo that I'll be working from. Because I didn't already have a really good backlit photo in my library, I licensed this photo from Adobe Stock because it's perfect for this demo, with the gorgeous natural backlighting from the sun bleeding into the model's hair. Now I'm prepping my board a little differently this time. Typically I just pull a toned board down from the shelf and go, but today I'm going to undo some of the gray tone in order to keep certain areas really bright. Looking at my reference photo off to the side, I did a quick pencil sketch as a guideline, and then I went back over the toned board with some white acrylic paint, just in the areas that I want my light to be the strongest. Paint is never 100% opaque in one layer, so I want as little of that gray tone competing with my light as possible. I let the acrylic dry before starting in with oil, and while I'm getting the rest of my board prepped, I'll give you a quick rundown of the materials that I'm using. I'm working on a 5x7-inch gessoed hardboard panel. I'll post my palette up on the screen for you. It's still the same palette that I typically use for my studies, but we'll be dipping into the titanium white and Naples yellow a lot today. And for my medium, I'll be using the Ray of Sunshine in a Dark World, otherwise known as Liquin. Since my goal for this study is to capture that strong edge light around the model, the main thing that I need to focus on first is keeping my values compressed within the portrait. And that means there's going to be less overall contrast between the lights and darks on the face. And the reason for doing the pencil sketch here instead of starting with my shadows is that there are almost no distinct shadow shapes within the face to define the form. Her skin is about as close as you get to being just a flat area of color, like there's no strong highlights or shadows, so the sketch helps give me a little bit better guidance on the placement of the features. Now, the other thing I'll need to concentrate on as the portrait develops is keeping those blown out whites really clean, meaning not letting my brushes get dirty or letting other pigments mix in with those light areas, and keeping the edges where those areas meet the hair saturated enough to feel like natural light. So while I'm setting up the basic values, I'm intentionally keeping the interior of the figure a little less saturated for contrast, not going all the way to gray, but just keeping it a little more neutral. Whenever I'm approaching a study with a unique lighting situation, it's not just about practicing the technical side of painting. I also like to use them as an opportunity to explore how I might use different lighting setups in finished illustrations. Your lighting choices have a huge impact on the mood of your paintings, and they can also be used to reinforce a narrative, or say something about a character or what the character's going through. At this point in my artistic growth arc, I like being able to be flexible with the strength and direction of my light sources, and vary it up based on how I want people to feel about an illustration. For example, backlighting is really useful if you want your subject to look ethereal or magical, but it could also just as easily work if your character's walking away from an explosion like a badass, where the light would be coming from fire instead of the sun. Strong backlighting might also be useful if you're trying to emphasize a character in a meaningful way. One of the clearest examples of that being movie posters, where strong light sources from behind an actor are used to throw rim light around their faces and separate them from the background or supporting characters. Movie poster backlight can sort of be like a halo or a bloom behind the main character sometimes that tells the viewer where to put their eyes. It creates a visual hierarchy, and it's often coupled with another light source or two to fill in some of the details of a character's face or create more drama. Learning to control my light was a long time process, because when I started illustrating, I knew that I generally wanted everything in my image to look like it was being affected by the same light source, but I didn't really consider what that source was all the time. When I used to shoot my early reference, it was typically just with whatever was already in the room at the time, and I unintentionally let that make a lot of weird shadow and color decisions for me. So you can do a lot with standard household lights, but you just have to be conscious of how you're using it. Now, lighting choices can also help unify an artist's work across their portfolio. They're part of what makes up your unique DNA blueprint as an artist, or your style. And most artists aren't 100% consistent with their lighting choices, again, because every painting has different needs. But if you look at enough collections of artists' work, you might notice patterns emerge. As an example of a contemporary portrait artist who's made strong backlighting and rim light part of their signature style is Stephen Sale. By lighting his models from behind with strong, colorful light sources, it's really easy to pick his work out of a lineup. Now, my go-to light source is top-down, usually picking a single source from high overhead, because I enjoy painting deep cast shadows under the eye sockets and under the nose and chin to create drama. So my question for you guys today is, what's your favorite type of lighting to use in your paintings? Or if you don't have a signature lighting setup that you prefer, what are some of your favorites to see in other artists' work? Before finishing up the portrait today, I wanted to take an opportunity to answer another viewer question from the comments on my previous videos. Daniel MC says, "Color kinda scares me. Do you have any tips for painting in color?" Now that's a question I can really relate to because I went through a really similar thing after I left art school. I had been working mostly in graphite and charcoal that whole time, and I hadn't really branched into painting yet. So I developed a bit of color phobia. And as a result, when I did start painting, there was kind of too much of a pendulum swing. Like I got really ham-fisted with it, and I used all the colors. But the good news is that you don't have to be like me, and what I would suggest for anyone in your situation is to start painting with a very limited palette. Like, give yourself limitations that aren't too far outside of your grayscale comfort zone at first. You might try just introducing one warm color and one cool color into your otherwise black and white palette, for example, and maybe even assign one of those to your highlights and the other to your shadows. So you're essentially working with warm and cool grays. But keep it nice and limited, just to get used to keeping your value structure intact with some color added. And then from there, you can start experimenting with adding another single dominant saturated color in just a few areas to see how it plays against those neutrals. The artist Anders Zorn famously used a limited palette of just black and white plus yellow ochre and cad red, and he had incredible results with it. In the Zorn palette, blue and other cool colors are substituted by the subtle coolness of the black. Now, if you're a digital painter, option paralysis might even be worse for you because your color options are essentially unlimited. And to get around that, you might want to create some swatches to sample from off to the side of your image, just so you're not tempted to grab whatever from the color picker. So thank you for the question, Daniel. And as always, if you have a question or if there's a lighting setup or something you'd like to see on the channel in the future, you are always welcome to ask in the comments. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this little demo and are feeling really inspired to go do some painting this week. I'm gonna go grab a cup of coffee, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.